Assassin. time. The name actually came when some weeks or months later it was getting close to our first performance in November '81 with the birthday party in a Berlin-based group called Malaria. And we thought, well, before that first performance we should actually have a record out. And we were recording the 12-inch Heaven Street 3-track, and I misheard something that Patrick said in the recording studio, and I thought he said Death in June, but he didn't. But I said the name, and it was instantaneous again. It was like, manna from heaven. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We've got a name. And so we finally had the name, which everyone has a great time interpreting, but even us, with this purely post-rationalisation, it was just my hearing. And things began to fall into place. We began to play more performances, and we started to build a following. And at some of these early performances, we noticed that members of Topi or PTV were turning up. And I was curious, because I was aware of PTV. I liked Genesis, and I liked what he was doing, and I was aware of David Tibet and his solo works with 23 Skidoo, and his involvement with PTV, and of course I was aware of the sort of the boys that were now in Cole, that were, like Sleazy had been in Throbbing Gristle, TG. And so I was curious these people were coming to see us, and I was making notes about this. I was actually keeping a file on David Tibet. Eventually, at a show we did at the bottom of the post office tower in a club that was called The Living Room, which was run by Alan McGee, who was running Creation Records at the time, but it was absolutely minuscule. He'd only put a few singles out by terrible groups, and had his own fanzine, was still working for British Row as far as I remember. And I knew Alan McGee from buying some of this stuff at Rough Trade. He introduced me to David Tibet, and we got on immediately that evening. Death and June was doing sort of 2 different shows at this club, different approaches for each show. And I'd been thinking about working with someone else, because Tony, and I thought my working relationship with Tony Wakefield was coming to an end. I had a feeling, instincts were telling me. And this would be round about 1983. And so as we got on like a house on fire, literally, it was said, we'd been noticing them turning up, and he said, he'd liked Crisis. It was one of his favourite punk groups, and he was intrigued in what Crisis had become, basically, or at least the main songwriters, Tony and I, becoming Death in June, and so we started communicating to that night, and he gave a whole list of sort of typed out lyrics, some of which we started sort of culling words from. The first one, I think, was The Torture Garden, which was really Patrick choosing randomly some words from what he'd been given. And then for me was She Said Destroy, which was pretty much word for word on Christmas Day 1983 became the song. I'd set aside that day. I told my partner I wouldn't be going to dinner with him and his family that day. I would stay in and write this song. I had a feeling that it's going to be important. So I wrote She Said Destroy on Christmas Day 1983. And via that connection with Tibet, Tibet was sort of like the clearinghouse of post-industrial folk. He knew everyone. And so I started to meet